noticed for these hats, because if you use a different acrylic yarn, like the ones they sell in Walmart, the cheap ones, I think they're just the Walmart brand, not sure, but I've bought that before and it's really rough. It kind of feels like a sponge in a way, so I wouldn't recommend to use it for hats like this if you want it to be soft, or blankets. This story that I found for you guys today, it really shows that you shouldn't be inviting any strangers inside your house. That's really risky and scary. It can turn out really badly. Our story starts off with Diane Holik. Diane was born on September 10th, 1958 in Long Island, New York. Diane was described as a workaholic, and she actually began working at IBM at a very young age. She began working there around 18 or 19 years old as a programmer, and she quickly rose up to be a senior programmer. So she was really smart. In 1996, Diane relocated for a job to Austin, Texas. Now, as you can imagine, Diane was pretty wealthy, and when she moved to Austin, Texas, she moved to a very nice and luxurious community. This community is called Great Hills in Austin, Texas. A few years after that, Diane began working as a early careers manager at IBM. So she would manage new employees. She was working at the Southwest region of IBM in Texas. Diane was actually working from home most of the time. This was not very common at all, especially during the early 2000s and late 90s. As most of you can probably remember, this only became very common during COVID a few years ago. During the quarantine, people moved to computers, but before that, most people would go to work all the time, and working from home was very, very rare. So you can see that Diane was very lucky at her job that she was able to work from home at this time. Diane also enjoyed going out and spending time with her friends and her two dogs. Diane also often liked to host parties in her house. When Diane turned 40 in 1998, she decided that she was ready to settle down and ready to get married. She met her fiancé, Dennis Connolly, through a dating website. Now, let me remind you that this was in late 90s and dating sites were in their infancy, so dating sites weren't very common also, and probably was only like one website available at that time. David was a divorced father of two, and he was a very successful businessman. I couldn't find where he was actually working, but he was very successful as well. Dennis actually proposed to Diane after only 2 months of dating. It might seem like a quick decision to some, but remember, these people were in their 40s already, so they didn't want to wait any longer. They knew what they wanted already. They were both successful and they didn't want to waste any time. Diane decided to sell her house in Austin and move into a house in Houston that they were building together there. It wasn't built yet. Dennis and Diane did have some got back together and decided they actually wanna get married and continue building the house. After that breakup, they actually went to a couples therapy because they realized they were both wrong and they wanted to fix their relationship, and it seemed like they were making progress. So in November of 2001, Diane was once again trying to sell her house so she can move in to their house in Houston with Dennis. However, also around the same time in November of 2001, she told a friend that she was actually not sure about her engagement to Dennis and she was planning to go on a date with someone else that she met online. So it seems like there's a lot of conflicting information from what I've read, because it seems like the relationship was great at first, but now Diane is having second thoughts, and to the point that she wants to go on a date with someone else to see if she has other options. And also the housing market was pretty slow at the time, so the house was taking forever to sell. Diane had her house listed for $435,000, which would equal to around $756,000 nowadays money. I think at that time that kind of price was a really nice price for a house, considering she lived alone there too. Diane was selling the house by herself without the real estate agent, and she kept a for sale sign in her front lawn so anyone can come in and inquire about the house or call her. On November 15th, 2001, Diane was working from home as usual, and she was on a conference call in the morning with her Los Angeles-based colleague, Cynthia Barajas. Diane came late for the call and explained to Cynthia that the reason why she was late was because there was a weird, strange man that came to the door. She answered he wanted to see the house, and she said that he's gonna be back with his wife later in the day to look around the house. Diane said that she is excited for this potential buyer of the house, but Cynthia actually advised Diane not to invite strangers inside her home when she's home alone. That's not a good idea. And I also agree with that. It seems like a risky situation, considering you are home alone. A stranger will be inside your house, knowing that you're home alone. If I was having an open house and I was alone selling the house, I would probably invite a friend over just to be safe, because you never know. During the call, Cynthia said that Diane told her she forgot to put on her engagement ring that day, and so she put Cynthia on hold and went upstairs and put on her engagement ring, and then went back on the call with Cynthia. That makes me think that the stranger that came to see Diane before must have thought that she's a single woman. Diane ended the call with Cynthia around 1:30 p.m. that day. Diane had another call with someone else at work around 3:30 p.m. and then she shut down her computer at around 3:59 p.m. So she was done with work at exactly 4 p.m. According to later released court documents, Diane mentioned about the strange man who visited her home while she was working to a friend on the phone, and she told this friend that this man gave her the creeps. That day, later in the afternoon, Austin was hit with a huge storm. Local news channels even warned residents of Austin not to come outside during the storm. It was too dangerous. Diane's friends tried to check with Diane after the storm had passed, because she lived alone, so her friends were worried, but none of her friends could get through to her. November 16th, 2001, which was a Friday. After Diane failed to appear in her morning phone conference, her coworkers began to worry. Her coworker Tina Fallon, who was based in Illinois, and Cynthia Barajas from Los Angeles began to call Diane, and they called each other as well, trying to figure out where she might be. Based on Diane's work ethic, Diane was always on time. She never missed any conference calls, and even if she did, she would always notify in advance. Tina knew about the storm in Texas, so she decided to call Austin PD and asked them to do a welfare check on Diane. Officers arrived to Diane's home at around 5:30 p.m. and they noticed that all the doors and windows are locked. However, through the window, they did notice that Diane's two dogs used the bathroom on the carpet, and they were barking as well. This was very unusual because Diane loved her dogs and she always walked them. Diane's neighbor, Lucky Brown, spotted the officers and came up to them and told them that she has a spare key because Diane often asked Lucky to sit with the dogs when she would be away. So she opened the door for police and let them in. The neighbor, Lucky Brown, said that she passed by Diane's house early in the morning around 7 a.m. and she noticed that the light was on at Diane's house inside the office, and so she just figured that Diane was up early in the morning on a conference call. It actually turned out that Diane's fiance, Dennis, called Lucky during the day of November 16th and left her voicemail to check on Diane because he knew that she had a spare key, and Lucky was not able to check her voicemail until later in the evening, so she didn't know about that. Dennis was actually on a business trip in Houston, Texas. As police entered the house, they found Diane on the second floor in the guest bedroom, lying face down. She was fully clothed and there was no sign of sexual assault, but she had ligature marks on her neck, carpet burns on her cheeks, like she was dragged, and also she had red marks on her wrists. The marks also suggested that her hands were most likely bound together with zip ties, and she was also strangled with zip ties as well, but no zip ties were found inside the house. So if zip ties were used to do this, the killer must have taken the zip ties with them. When police rolled Diane over, they found a charm that fell out of her hair, and this charm was originally attached to a necklace. This necklace was never found. Diane's engagement ring, which cost almost $17,000. That's a crazy expensive engagement ring, was also missing. Diane was still wearing her expensive watch, however, and the tennis bracelet, and she still had some money in her pockets. So at first it seemed like it was a robbery, but not much was missing, and a lot of her jewelry inside the house was also still there. So the only thing that was missing was the engagement ring and the necklace and some other minor things, but her house was filled with a lot of expensive other items that were still there. Medical examiner found that Diane's cause of death was ligature strangulation. The medical examiner also estimated that Diane died roughly between November 15th at 3 p.m. to November 16th at 3 a.m., which is a pretty big window, I think. Like 12 hours. Dennis Connolly became the main suspect, of course, being her fiance, but he had a pretty strong alibi. He was in Houston for work at the time. There were messages from Dennis that were found house. Dennis did admit to their rocky relationship to the police and stated that they both had baggage that they brought to the relationship, and he doesn't deny that, but he did not kill her. During the questioning, Dennis brought up Diane's co-worker Ray, who was apparently in love with Diane. Dennis stated that he knew that this guy Ray was obsessed with Diane and even tried to go out with her a few times, but Diane would always say no. He would worship Diane's ground, apparently, and constantly give flowers and different gifts to Diane. And Diane's friends confirmed this, saying that Diane knew that Ray was in love with her, and she would use that for her own benefit. She would even ask him to sit with her dog sometimes when she would be out of town, out of state, and he would gladly do so. And she gave him her spare key as well. Ray told police after questioning that he knew Diane for 2 years and had not spoken to her for 2 weeks at this point. He did admit about his feelings towards Diane to police, saying that he's been in love with her, but Diane didn't feel the same, so he kind of learned to live with that. Ray also had an alibi. He was at work really late that day, until around 8 p.m. and then he only got home at 10 p.m. because of the storm. Ray also submitted his DNA to the police. Ray actually pointed the finger back at Dennis, saying that Dennis was most likely the person that killed Diane, and they always were arguing together. They were not right for each other from the beginning. Police also noted that Ray was overly eager about helping police with investigation, which they thought was odd, but they didn't find any evidence on him. In fact, police didn't find any evidence that would link Ray or Dennis to the murder of Diane. So police decided to go around the neighborhood where Diane lived and to the houses that were also listed for sale and just ask those people if they've seen anything weird happening. Several female homeowners reported seeing a really strange man that visited their house. They stated that this strange man gave him weird, creepy feeling. This man would come over to the houses that had a for sale sign and would ask for a unscheduled tour of the house. He also claimed that he could pay with cash if he liked the house, and he will come back later in the day with his wife. Everyone who saw this person described this man to be strange and scary looking. Many women were so scared of him that they wouldn't even open the door. One woman who was a real estate agent let him inside the house, and once inside, this man was asking if she lived alone, was asking all these weird questions, and then he wanted to see the upstairs bedroom as well. The woman became concerned and asked him to leave, but before he left, she asked him if she can get his phone number and name. Police later found that this phone number and name did not match together. It was just a random phone number, a random name. It was clear that neither one was tied to the killer. The women who were approached by this strange man helped police to create a sketch. This sketch was featured on the local news. After the sketch came out, a lot of people started calling police and saying that they've seen this man, and he also came over to their house and was asking for a tour of the house. This one woman named Tammy, who was also a real estate agent, she let him inside the house, and right away she said that he gave her the creeps. He tried to get close to her. He was very aggressive and wouldn't look at her in the eyes. And she said the whole time he was inside the house, she was thinking to herself, how can she escape this man now that he's inside? She was so scared. And eventually she got him out of the house. aggressive towards her, so she got really scared, and she had a little baby at home as well. But eventually she was able to get him out of the house somehow, and this man left behind a weird flyer. And so police took that flyer, and this is when they matched the fingerprints from the flyer to Patrick Russo. Tony Russo admitted that he was in the neighborhood at the time of Diane's death. He said that he was there to drop off a Christian music CD to one of the Christian radio stations that were in the neighborhood. When investigators interviewed the radio station manager, they got a completely different story from the manager. The manager said that he knew Tony Russo, but he never saw him that day at all. Also, because a tornado was approaching, everyone at the station had to move. They all moved to the front of the building, and they opened the door to equalize the pressure in case the storm came in. So if anyone had approached the building, they would have seen them right away, even outside. This is when police knew that Tony Russo was lying to them. However, they searched his home for any kind of evidence, and they came up with nothing. Until they started leaving their residence and found that there were some kind of zip ties, and those zip ties matched with the marks of the zip ties on Diane's neck and wrists. So they couldn't really arrest him for that, but they were able to arrest Tony Russo for lying to the police. Also, 15 women picked Tony Russo out of a lineup, and these women were the ones who opened the door to the strange man that visited their home. And this is when police knew that they had the right guy. One more evidence was that police found a white towel in Diane's house, and they found little hairs on this towel, and these little hairs ended up matching DNA to Tony Russo. Investigators also found that Tony's cell phone was nearby Diane's house at the time of her murder, and investigators believe that the reason why there was this towel with his hair is because she gave him that towel to wipe off all the water because it was raining a lot outside because of the storm. And so she gave him that towel, and he attacked her and then killed her and dragged her and left her there on the second floor. After looking at Tony's computer, investigators also found that he was looking at some weird websites. There is this website for BDSM, but not only that, it was where you can choose how you want to see a woman get killed. And his choice was always asphyxiation. There was one video that he downloaded the day before Diane's murder, and it was about how to kill a person and then make it look like a robbery after that. So that's exactly what happened. In this video, the person who was doing that, he was also pretending to be a buyer of a house. So investigators now had enough evidence to charge Patrick Russo with Diane's murder. On February 5th, 2004, trial began for Patrick Anthony Russo. 14 women took the stand and testified that Patrick Russo was the man who approached them about purchasing their house. After the jury was provided with evidence and listening to all the witnesses and all the testimonies, they took 11 hours to deliberate and came up with a verdict. They found Patrick Anthony Russo guilty of capital murder. evidence. And I'm glad he's behind bars. It's really scary that these kind of people are walking among us. This is what I have done so far. Now I count the stitches here. One of these is 2, so it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I see you guys' comments, and I do see that you guys would be interested for me to show a tutorial. I am working on that, and to see how many people are interested in that. Would you guys prefer a tutorial that's not ASMR, just a tutorial to show how I make my projects, or would you want ASMR crochet still, but a tutorial version? So let me know